I didn't expect to find her sitting on the edge of a dock at 6 in the morning, staring at the water like it owed her an explanation. I had driven 8 hours to this cabin rental in the mountains specifically to avoid people. The divorce papers were signed 3 weeks ago. My apartment still smelled like her perfume even though she'd moved out 2 months before that. I needed silence. I needed distance. I needed to stop waking up reaching for someone who wasn't there anymore. The cabin was supposed to be isolated. 1 bedroom, a wood stove, a porch overlooking a lake so still it looked like glass. The listing said the nearest neighbor was half a mile away. That was the selling point. No one to ask how I was doing. No one to give me that head tilt of pity. Just me and the quiet. Except she was there. Sitting on the shared dock between my cabin and the one next door. Her legs dangling over the edge, bare feet just above the waterline. She wore a gray sweatshirt too big for her frame and her hair was pulled back in a messy knot. No makeup. No jewelry. She looked like someone who had also driven a long way to disappear. I stood at the edge of the trees for a moment, debating whether to turn around. But she glanced over her shoulder and saw me. Our eyes met. She didn't smile. Didn't wave. Just looked at me for a second, then turned back to the water. I walked down to the dock anyway. My footsteps made the wood creak and she didn't move. I stopped a few feet behind her. The air smelled like pine and damp earth. A loon called from somewhere across the lake. I cleared my throat. She didn't turn around. Didn't think anyone else would be out here, I said. My voice sounded rough. I hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days. She nodded slowly. Same. Her voice was quiet, controlled. Like she was used to being listened to. I can go, I offered. She shook her head. It's fine. Dock's big enough. I hesitated, then sat down about 6 feet away from her, letting my legs hang over the edge the same way hers did. The water was dark and cold-looking. Mist hung low over the surface. We sat in silence for a while. I didn't know what to say, and she didn't seem interested in talking. That should have been awkward, but it wasn't. It felt like we were both hiding from the same thing. After a few minutes, she spoke without looking at me. You here alone? I nodded, then realized she wasn't looking. Yeah. You. Yeah. Another silence. A bird skimmed the water, sending out ripples. Running from something or running to something? She asked. I thought about that. Not sure there's a difference. She turned her head slightly, just enough that I could see the edge of a faint smile. Fair answer. We didn't say anything else. After maybe 10 more minutes, she stood up, brushed off her sweatshirt, and walked back toward her cabin without a word. I watched her go. She moved carefully, like someone who was tired but didn't want anyone to know. I stayed on the dock until the mist burned off. When I finally went back inside, I made coffee and stood at the window. I could see her cabin through the trees. The lights were off. I wondered if she was sleeping or just sitting in the dark the way I had been for the past 3 weeks. That night, I heard her on her porch. I was sitting outside with the book I wasn't reading, and I heard the creak of her screen door. She didn't come out, just stood there in the doorway for a minute, then went back inside. The next morning, she was on the dock again. Same spot. Same sweatshirt. I almost didn't go down, but something pulled me out of the cabin. Maybe it was the fact that she didn't expect anything from me. Didn't ask questions. Didn't need me to be okay. I sat in the same spot as the day before. She glanced at me this time. You're making this a habit, she said. There was no edge to it. Just observation. You were here first, I said. I can leave. I didn't say that. We sat. The silence felt different today. Less heavy. After a while, she said, I'm Elena. I looked at her. She was still watching the water. David, I said. She nodded. Nice to meet you, David. You too. That was it. She stayed for another 20 minutes, then left without saying goodbye. I noticed she walked with a slight limp. Not obvious, but there. Like an old injury she'd learned to hide. Over the next few days, we fell into a pattern. She'd be on the dock in the mornings. I'd show up a few minutes later. We'd sit. Sometimes we'd talk. Mostly we didn't. One morning she asked me what I did for work. I'm a systems analyst, I said. Mostly remote now. I worked in an office for 10 years, then the company downsized. I went freelance. Do you like it? I shrugged. It pays the bills. Keeps me busy. She nodded. Busy's good. I waited, but she didn't offer what she did. I didn't push. That afternoon, I was carrying groceries from my car when I saw her struggling with the stuck window on her cabin. She was pushing at the frame, her jaw tight. I set the bags down and walked over. Need a hand? She looked at me, hesitated, then stepped back. It's been stuck since I got here. I thought I could muscle it. I climbed up onto the porch and examined the frame. The wood was warped. I pushed up hard, wiggling it side to side, and it finally gave. The window slid open with a groan. She exhaled. Thank you. No problem. I stepped down. She looked at me for a moment like she was deciding something. You want some coffee? I just made a pot. I almost said no. I'd come here to be alone. But there was something in the way she asked. Not needy. Not flirty. Just human. Sure, I said. Her cabin was almost identical to mine. Same layout, same furniture. But she'd brought things with her. A blanket draped over the couch. A stack of books on the table. A pair of running shoes by the door. It felt lived in. She poured 2 mugs of coffee and handed me one. We sat at the small kitchen table. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. She stirred her coffee slowly, watching the spoon. You don't have to tell me, she said quietly. But you've got that look. What look? Like you're trying to figure out if you're allowed to start over. I set my mug down. My throat tightened. She didn't look at me. Just kept stirring. I got divorced, I said. The word still felt strange in my mouth. 3 weeks ago. Officially. She nodded. I'm sorry. It was coming. We both knew. But knowing doesn't make it easier. No, she said. It doesn't. There was weight in the way she said it. Like she knew. We drank our coffee. I didn't ask her anything. She didn't offer. When I finished, I stood up. Thanks for the coffee. Thanks for the window. I smiled a little. Anytime. That became the new pattern. Mornings on the dock. Occasional moments of help. A stuck drawer. A flat tire on her car. Small things. She never asked, but I started noticing when something needed fixing. One evening, I was chopping wood behind my cabin when she walked over. She had a Tupperware container in her hands. I made too much pasta, she said. Thought you might want some. I looked at the container. It smelled like garlic and tomatoes. My stomach growled. You didn't have to. I know. I took it. Thank you. She nodded and turned to go. Elena, I said. She stopped. You're a terrible liar. You didn't make too much. You made extra. She looked back at me, and for the first time I saw her really smile. Not polite. Not small. A real smile. Maybe, she said. Then she walked back to her cabin. I ate the pasta on my porch. It was the best thing I'd tasted in months. The next morning she wasn't on the dock. I waited for 20 minutes, then walked back to my cabin. I told myself it was fine. She didn't know me anything. But I kept glancing toward her cabin. The lights were off. The car was still there. That night I saw her on the porch again. She was sitting in one of the old wooden chairs, wrapped in a blanket, staring out at the dark lake. I almost went over. But something stopped me. She looked like she needed to be alone. The next morning she was back. Same spot. Same sweatshirt. I sat down beside her. You okay? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, Do you ever feel like you're waiting for permission to be happy again? I looked at her. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon. Yeah, I said. Every day. She nodded slowly. Me too. We sat there as the sun came up. The light turned the water gold. Neither of us said anything else. But something shifted. It was small. Quiet. Like the first crack in ice before the thaw. A few days later, I was reading on my porch when I heard her laugh. It was the first time I'd heard it. Bright and unexpected. She was on her phone, pacing near the edge of her yard. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but she sounded different. Lighter. When she hung up, she looked over and saw me watching. I raised my hand in a half wave. She walked over. Sorry. Didn't mean to be loud. You weren't. Just sounded like good news. She hesitated, then sat down on the porch steps. My sister. She's pregnant. First kid. That's great. Yeah, it is. But her smile faded a little. She's worried I'm going to miss it. The baby shower. The birth. All of it. Are you? She looked down at her hands. I don't know. I've been trying to figure some things out. I told her I'd be back in time. But I don't know if I'm ready. Ready for what? She met my eyes. To go back to being the person everyone expects me to be. I didn't know what to say to that. So I just nodded. She stood up. I should let you read. Elena. She paused. You don't have to be anyone but who you are right now. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled. Sad but real. Thanks, David. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what she'd said. About permission. About expectations. I wondered what she was running from, and why it felt so familiar. The next morning the dock was empty. I waited. She didn't come. I went back to the cabin and made breakfast, but I kept glancing out the window. Around noon, I saw her car pull out of the driveway. She didn't come back until evening. When she did, I was outside splitting wood. She got out of the car slowly, carrying a bag of groceries. I set down the axe. You need help. She shook her head. I'm good. But she didn't move. Just stood there, looking at the cabin like it was a problem she didn't know how to solve. I walked over. Elena. She looked at me. Her eyes were red. I went into town, she said quietly. I saw someone I used to work with. They recognized me. And I remembered why I left. I wanted to ask, but I didn't. I just stood there. She took a breath. I'm not who you think I am, David. I don't think you're anyone, I said. I just think you're here. Same as me. She looked at me like I'd said something in a language she used to speak but had forgotten. Then she nodded. Yeah, I guess I am. She went inside. I went back to chopping wood. But I kept thinking about the way she'd looked at that cabin, like it was both a refuge and a cage. That night I heard music coming from her place. Soft. Classical. I stood on my porch and listened. It was the saddest thing I'd ever heard. The music stopped around midnight. I stayed on the porch longer than I should have, listening to the silence that followed. The next morning she wasn't on the dock again. I told myself to let it go. She had her own reasons for being here, her own things to work through. I wasn't her keeper. But when I saw her car still parked and no lights on in her cabin by mid-morning, something didn't sit right. I walked over and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. Elena? You okay? I heard movement inside. The door opened a crack. She looked exhausted. Her hair was down, uncombed. Same sweatshirt as always, but wrinkled like she'd slept in it. I'm fine, she said. Her voice was hoarse. You don't look fine. I said I'm fine, David. There was an edge now. Not anger exactly. More like a wall going up. I should have backed off. Instead I said, when's the last time you ate? She blinked. What? Food. When did you last eat something? She stared at me for a moment. Then her shoulders dropped. I don't know. Yesterday morning maybe. I went back to my cabin and made 2 sandwiches. Nothing fancy. Just turkey and cheese on wheat bread. I brought them over with a bottle of water. She was sitting on her porch steps when I got back. I handed her a sandwich. She took it without arguing. We ate in silence. She finished half, then set it down. I used to be really good at taking care of myself, she said quietly. What happened? She smiled, but there was no humor in it. I got good at taking care of everyone else instead. I didn't push. We sat there while the afternoon stretched out. Finally, she spoke again. I run a company. Well, I'm the CEO. 240 employees. I built it from nothing over 12 years. It's successful. More successful than I ever imagined. I looked at her. She was watching a bird hop along the porch railing. That's impressive, I said. It's exhausting. She turned to me. Everyone sees the success, the revenue, the growth, the awards. But they don't see what it costs. The marriages that fall apart because you're never home. The friendships that fade because you can't remember the last time you called back. The version of yourself you had to bury to become the person they needed you to be. Her voice cracked on the last part. She looked away quickly. I came here because I couldn't breathe anymore, she continued. I was in a board meeting 6 weeks ago, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt anything. Not happy, not sad, just nothing. Like I was watching my own life happen to someone else. I knew that feeling. The numbness. The distance. So you left, I said. I told them I needed a month. Medical leave. They don't know where I am. My assistant thinks I'm at a wellness retreat in California. My sister thinks I'm doing intensive therapy in New York. Nobody knows I'm sitting in a cabin in the middle of nowhere eating gas station sandwiches with a stranger. These are homemade, I said. She laughed. Actually laughed. It was brief but real. You know what I mean. I nodded. Yeah, I do. We sat quiet for a while. Then she said, your turn. My turn what? To tell me why you're really here. And don't say the divorce. That's the what. Not the why. I looked out at the lake. The water was gray today, restless. We were together for 8 years. Married for 5. And somewhere in there, we stopped being people who loved each other and became people who were just going through the motions. She wanted kids. I kept saying later, when work settled down, when we had more saved. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared I'd be a bad father. Scared I'd mess it up the way my dad did. Elena listened without interrupting. She finally told me she couldn't wait anymore. That she'd spent 3 years waiting for me to be ready, and she realized I was never going to be. She wasn't wrong. I wasn't ready. I'm still not. But losing her made me realize I wasn't really present for anything. Not my marriage. Not my work. Not my own life. I was just existing. So you came here to figure out how to live again, Elena said. It wasn't a question. Something like that. Or maybe just to sit with the fact that I don't know how. She nodded slowly. I think that's braver than you realize. The next few days were different. We still met on the dock in the mornings, but now we talked. Real conversations. She told me about growing up in Chicago, the daughter of Polish immigrants who ran a small bakery. How she'd worked there every morning before school, learning to calculate profit margins before she learned algebra. How she'd gotten a scholarship to Northwestern and studied business because she wanted to build something bigger than a corner shop. Something that couldn't be wiped out by a bad month or a new competitor. My parents were so proud when I got my first real job, she said. I was making more in a year than they'd made in 5. I sent them money every month, helped them expand the bakery, and then my dad had a stroke. He recovered mostly, but he couldn't work the same way. I wanted to hire people to help them, but he was too proud. Said he didn't build his business to have strangers running it. That must have been hard, I said. It was. He died 2 years later. Heart attack. And my mom, she just folded. Sold the bakery within 6 months. Said it wasn't the same without him. I tried to convince her to keep it, told her I'd help manage it, but she said some things aren't meant to outlive the people who built them. There was something in the way she said that last part. Like she was talking about more than a bakery. I told her about my dad too. How he'd been there physically but absent in every way that mattered. How he'd sit at the dinner table reading the paper while my mom asked about my day, and he'd grunt occasionally but never actually looked up. How I swore I'd never be like that, and then I became exactly that with my wife. I'd come home from work and she'd try to tell me about her day, and I'd be on my laptop half listening, saying uh-huh at the right moments. And I didn't even realize I was doing it until she stopped trying. Elena reached over and put her hand on mine. Just for a moment. Her skin was cold from the morning air. We become the things we're afraid of, she said softly. Even when we're trying not to. I looked at her. Yeah, we do. She pulled her hand back, but the warmth stayed. That afternoon, I heard hammering coming from her cabin. I walked over and found her on a ladder, trying to fix a shutter that had come loose. The ladder was wobbling. Elena, get down from there before you break your neck. She looked down at me. I've got it. You're on a ladder that's sinking into mud. You don't got it. She climbed down, frustrated. I can do things myself, you know. I know you can. But you don't have to. I steadied the ladder, repositioned it on solid ground, and climbed up. The shutter was hanging by one hinge. I pulled out the screws, examined the wood, and saw it was rotted. This needs to be replaced. The wood's too far gone. Of course it is, she muttered. I climbed down. I can run into town tomorrow, grab some wood and new hinges. Won't take long to fix. You don't have to do that. I know. But I'm going anyway. Need anything else while I'm there? She looked at me for a long moment. Why are you being so nice to me? Why wouldn't I be? She didn't have an answer for that. The next morning I drove into town. It was a small place, one main street with a hardware store, a diner, a post office. I got the supplies I needed and was walking back to my truck when I saw a woman staring at me from across the street. She was in her 50s, wearing a quilted vest and holding a coffee cup. She crossed the street toward me. You're staying up at the Mercer Cabins, aren't you? She said. Yeah, just for a few weeks. You're with that woman? The one in the other cabin. There was something in her tone. Not quite accusatory, but close. We're neighbors, I said carefully. Uh-huh. She sipped her coffee. Donna at the market said she came in last week, bought 2 weeks of groceries in one trip. Paid cash. Didn't want to chat. Seemed secretive. I didn't like where this was going. Maybe she just values her privacy. Maybe. Or maybe she's running from something. We don't get a lot of outsiders this time of year. Makes people curious. Well, you can tell Donna that we're both just here for some quiet. Nothing mysterious about it. The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just looking out for the community. We're a small town. We notice things. I got in my truck and drove back, irritated. Small towns. Everyone in everyone else's business. When I got back to the cabin, Elena was sitting on her porch with a book. I grabbed the lumber and walked over. Got what we need. I'll fix that shutter this afternoon. Thank you. She set the book down. Everything okay? You look annoyed. I told her about the woman. Elena's expression hardened. Let me guess. Mid-50s, blonde hair, nosy smile. You met her. She came by yesterday while you were gone. Knocked on my door, said she was welcoming me to the area. Asked a lot of questions. Where I was from, what I did, how long I was staying, whether I was here alone. What did you tell her? That I appreciated her concern and that I valued my privacy. She didn't like that. Elena stood up. This is what I was afraid of. Why I didn't want to go into town. People recognize me sometimes. Or they don't recognize me, but they sense something's off. A woman alone, not offering explanations. It makes them uncomfortable. You think she recognized you? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe she's just bored and I'm the most interesting thing that's happened here in 6 months. Either way, it's a problem. I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her jaw tightened. Hey, it's okay. So what if people talk? We're not doing anything wrong. You don't understand. If word gets out that I'm here, if someone posts about it on social media or calls a reporter, this whole thing falls apart. The board will demand I come back. My family will panic. The narrative will shift from she needed a break to she's unstable. She can't handle the pressure. Everything I've built will be questioned. Is that what you think? That taking time for yourself makes you unstable? She looked at me and I saw something I hadn't seen before. Fear. In my world? Yes. Weakness isn't allowed. Doubt isn't allowed. You have to be on all the time, or someone's ready to take your place. I set the lumber down. That's not weakness, Elena. That's being human. Tell that to my board. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just started fixing the shutter. She watched for a while, then went inside. I worked for the next 2 hours replacing the rotted wood, installing new hinges, making sure everything was solid. When I finished, she came back out with 2 beers. I don't usually drink in the afternoon, she said, handing me one. But today feels like an exception. We sat on the porch steps and drank in silence. The beer was cold and bitter and exactly what I needed. "I'm sorry," she said after a while. "For what?" "For dragging you into my mess. You came here to get away from your own problems, and now you're dealing with mine." "I don't mind." "You should. I'm complicated. And not in a fun, mysterious way. In a genuine disaster way." I looked at her. "We're all disasters, Elena. Some of us are just better at hiding it." She smiled a little. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. I guess I thought anyone I met out here would either want something from me or want to fix me. You're not doing either. Maybe I'm just too broken to notice how broken you are." She laughed. A real full laugh. "That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." "Yeah, well, I'm full of those." We finished our beers as the sun started to set. The light turned everything gold and orange, and for a moment the world felt still. "David." "Yeah. Thank you. For the shutter. For the sandwich. For not asking questions I'm not ready to answer. Anytime." She stood up and went inside. I stayed on the porch a little longer watching the light fade. That night I couldn't sleep again. I kept thinking about what she'd said. About being complicated. About people wanting things from her. I wondered if she'd ever had someone who just wanted her to be okay. Around midnight I heard her door open. I looked out my window and saw her walking down to the dock. I watched for a minute, then grabbed a jacket and followed. She was sitting at the edge, her feet in the water this time. I sat down next to her. "Couldn't sleep either?" I asked. She shook her head. "Too much in my head. Want to talk about it?" "Not really. But I don't want to be alone either." "Okay." We sat there in the dark. The water lapped against the dock posts. The stars were out, more than I'd ever seen in the city. "When I was a kid," Elena said quietly, "my dad used to take me out to the lake near our house. We'd sit on the dock just like this and he'd tell me stories about the stars. He didn't know the real constellations. He'd just make things up. That one's the baker's oven. That one's the pierogi. That one's the stubborn goat because it never moves." I smiled. "Sounds like a good dad." He was. He believed in me more than I believed in myself. When I told him I wanted to start my own company, he didn't hesitate. He took out a second mortgage on the bakery to give me the seed money. I tried to tell him it was too risky, but he said, "Elena, you don't get anywhere by playing it safe." He was right. Yeah, he was. But I wonder sometimes if he'd be proud of what I built, or if he'd be disappointed in what I became. What's the difference? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He built something with his hands. Something real. I build spreadsheets, strategies, profit margins. I don't make anything people can touch. I just make money." "You employ 240 people," I said. "That's real. Those are lives. Families. People who can pay rent and buy groceries because of what you built." She looked at me and her eyes were wet. "You really believe that?" "Yeah, I do." She wiped her eyes quickly. "Sorry. I don't usually do this." "Do what?" "Fall apart in front of people." "You're not falling apart. You're just being honest." She leaned her head on my shoulder. Just for a moment. It was so unexpected that I froze. But then I relaxed and we sat there like that, her head on my shoulder, the stars overhead, the water dark and quiet below us. "David." "Yeah. I'm glad you're here." "Me too." We stayed until the cold drove us back inside. But something had shifted. The air between us felt different. Less careful. More true. The next morning things felt different. Not awkward but charged somehow. Like we'd crossed a line neither of us had meant to cross. And now we were both pretending we hadn't noticed. She was on the dock when I got there. But she didn't turn around when she heard my footsteps. I sat down in my usual spot. The silence stretched out, but it wasn't comfortable anymore. It was loaded. "About last night," she started. "It's fine," I said quickly. "You don't have to explain anything. I just don't want you to think I'm using you. Like an emotional crutch or something." I looked at her. "Are you?" She met my eyes. "I don't know. Maybe. I don't have a lot of practice at this. At what? Letting people in. Being vulnerable. All of it. She looked back at the water. In my world, vulnerability is currency. You show weakness, someone uses it against you. A competitor. A board member. Sometimes even people you thought were friends. You learn to keep everything locked down. That sounds lonely, I said. It is. We sat with that for a while. Then I said, for what it's worth, I don't think you're using me. I think you're just tired of being strong all the time. And that's okay. You're allowed to be tired. She nodded slowly. What about you? Are you tired of being strong? I was never strong to begin with. I was just good at avoiding things. That's not true. You drove 8 hours to face yourself. That takes strength. Or cowardice. I couldn't face my life, so I ran away from it. You didn't run. You regrouped. There's a difference. I wanted to believe her, but I wasn't sure I did. That afternoon, I went for a walk in the woods behind the cabins. The trails were overgrown but still visible, winding through pine trees and over moss-covered rocks. I needed to clear my head. Being around Elena was starting to feel like standing too close to a fire. Warm but dangerous. I was about a mile in when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw her wearing hiking boots and a fleece jacket. Mind if I join you? She asked. I thought you wanted space. I did. But then I realized I've been alone for 6 weeks, and I'm tired of my own company. We walked together. She was slower than me, favoring her right leg slightly. I matched her pace. What happened to your leg? I asked. She hesitated, then said, torn ACL. From running. I used to run marathons back before the company took over my life. I was training for Chicago, pushed too hard, didn't listen to my body when it told me to stop. Tore it completely. Had surgery, did the physical therapy, but it never quite healed right. You still run. Not like I used to. I try, but it's different now. I can feel the weakness. It reminds me that I'm not invincible. Even though I spend most of my time pretending I am. We climbed over a fallen tree. She took my hand for balance, then let go quickly. Everything reminds me that I'm not invincible these days, she continued. My knee. The gray hairs I dye every 3 weeks. The fact that I need reading glasses now but refuse to wear them in meetings because it makes me look old. The way I can't sleep past 5 in the morning anymore because my brain won't shut off. How old are you? I asked. 41. You. 36. She smiled. You're a baby. Doesn't feel like it. It never does. But trust me, you've got time. Time to figure things out. Time to start over. Time to make different choices. You talk like you don't. She stopped walking. We were in a small clearing, sunlight filtering through the branches overhead. I don't know if I do. The company is at a critical point. We're negotiating a merger that could triple our size. If I'm not there, if I'm not the one steering it, it could fall apart. Or worse, it could succeed without me, and then what? What does that say about whether I was ever really necessary? Maybe it says you built something strong enough to survive without you. Isn't that the point? She looked at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. No. The point is to be indispensable. If you're not indispensable, you're replaceable. And if you're replaceable, then what was any of it for? I didn't know how to respond to that. We started walking again. After a while, she said, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be so heavy all the time. You must think I'm exhausting. I think you're honest. That's different. Honest is just another word for unfiltered. My publicist would have a heart attack if she heard half the things I say to you. Good thing she's not here. Elena laughed. Yeah, good thing. We walked for another hour, looping back toward the cabins through a different trail. At one point, the path narrowed and we had to walk single file. I went first, holding branches back so they wouldn't snap in her face. When we emerged back at the cabins, the sun was starting to set. We stood between our 2 porches, not quite ready to separate. Thank you for letting me come with you, she said. I didn't let you. You just showed up. Still, thank you for not telling me to go away. I wouldn't do that. Some people would. Some people have. There was a story there, but she didn't offer it and I didn't ask. You want dinner? I said instead. I was going to make pasta. Actual pasta this time, not a sandwich. She smiled. You don't have to feed me. I know. But I'm going to anyway. Okay. But I'm helping. We cooked together in my cabin. It was small and awkward, bumping into each other in the tiny kitchen, but it felt good. Normal. She chopped vegetables while I boiled water. We didn't talk much, just moved around each other like we'd done this before. When the pasta was ready, we sat at the small table and ate. It wasn't fancy, just spaghetti with Jared sauce and the vegetables she'd chopped. But it tasted better than anything I'd made in months. This is nice, she said quietly. Yeah, it is. I can't remember the last time I had dinner with someone and didn't talk about work, or strategy, or quarterly projections. What did you talk about? Nothing. Work is all there is. Work and the things that support work. Exercise so I have energy for work. Sleep so I can function at work. Relationships that fell apart because I chose work. You were married? I asked. She shook her head. Engaged. Twice, actually. The first one ended because he wanted me to slow down, maybe start a family, and I wasn't ready. The second one ended because he couldn't handle that I made more money than him. He never said it directly, but I could feel it. The way he'd make little comments about my schedule, or how I was always on my phone, or how I cared more about the company than him. Did you? Care more about the company? She set down her fork. Honestly? Yeah, I did. Because the company never asked me to be smaller. It never resented my success. It never made me feel like I had to choose between being good at what I do and being lovable. That's not a choice you should have to make. Tell that to every man I've ever dated. We finished eating in silence. I washed the dishes while she dried. Our hands touched under the water once, reaching for the same plate, and we both pulled back like we'd been shocked when the dishes were done. She stood by the door, hesitating. I should go. Let you have your space. You don't have to. I do. If I stay, I'm going to say things I'm not ready to say, and you're going to be kind about it, and then tomorrow will be weird. I looked at her. What things? She met my eyes. Things like how I haven't felt this comfortable around someone in years. How I keep waiting for you to want something from me, and when you don't, I don't know what to do with that. How scared I am that this is just some temporary bubble. And when we both leave here, it'll disappear like it never existed. My heart was pounding. Elena. See? I told you. Too much. She opened the door. Good night, David. Good night. She walked back to her cabin, and I stood in the doorway watching her go. I wanted to call out to tell her to come back, to say that I felt it too. But I didn't. Because she was right. This was a bubble. And bubbles always burst. 3 days passed. The woman from town didn't come back. No reporters appeared. No phone calls. The world left us alone, at least for now. Elena started to relax again, but something had shifted between us. We were more careful now. More aware of the space we occupied, the words we chose, the moments our hands almost touched. On the 4th morning, she was back on the dock. I brought coffee this time. 2 mugs. She took one without a word. We sat and watched the sun come up, steam rising from our cups into the cold air. I've been thinking, she said. About what? About what happens when this ends. When we both have to go back. I didn't say anything. I'd been avoiding that thought. I go back to Chicago, she continued. Back to the office, the board meetings, the pressure. Back to being the version of myself that everyone needs. And you go back to wherever you're from. Back to your life. Pittsburgh, I said. I'm from Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh. That's what, 8 hours from Chicago. 7 if you don't hit traffic. She nodded slowly. 7 hours is far. It doesn't have to be. She looked at me. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe this doesn't have to end just because we leave here. Maybe we stay in touch. Maybe we figure out how to be part of each other's lives in the real world. David, you don't understand. My real life doesn't have room for this. For you. For anything that isn't work. I've tried before and it never works. I become the person who cancels plans, who forgets birthdays, who's always on her phone during dinner. I don't want to do that to you. What if I'm okay with that? You say that now. But 6 months from now, when I've canceled on you for the 10th time, when you realize that I'm never going to be able to put you first, you'll resent me. And I can't handle watching another person I care about look at me like I'm the problem. You're not a problem, Elena. Yes, I am. I'm a workaholic with commitment issues and a company that demands everything I have. That's not relationship material. That's a liability. I set my coffee down. You know what I think? I think you're scared. Not of the work. Not of the pressure. You're scared that if you let someone in, they might ask you to choose. And you're terrified you'll choose wrong. She stared at me. That's not fair. Maybe not. But it's true. She stood up abruptly. I need to go. Elena, wait. But she was already walking back to her cabin. I watched her go, frustration building in my chest. I'd pushed too hard. Said too much. That afternoon, I chopped wood to burn off the energy. The repetitive motion helped clear my head. I was halfway through the pile when I heard her voice behind me. You're right. I turned. She was standing at the edge of the yard, arms wrapped around herself. About what? About being scared. About all of it. She walked closer. I've spent my entire adult life building walls, keeping people at a distance, telling myself it was necessary, that it was the price of success. But the truth is, I'm just afraid. I set down the axe. Afraid of what? Of failing. Of letting people down. Of being ordinary. My whole life I've been running from the idea that I might not be special, that everything I've built might not matter. And if I let myself want something other than work, if I let myself want you and it doesn't work out, then what? Then I'm just someone who sacrificed everything for nothing. Or, I said quietly, you're someone who finally let yourself want something real. She closed the distance between us. We were standing so close I could feel the warmth radiating from her body. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Do what? Let someone matter. Be vulnerable. Want something I can't control. You don't have to know how. You just have to try. She reached up and touched my face, her fingers cold against my cheek. What if I mess this up? Then we'll figure it out. Together. She kissed me. It was soft at first, hesitant, like she was testing whether this was real. Then deeper, more certain. I pulled her closer and she wrapped her arms around my neck, and for a moment nothing else existed. Just her and me and the quiet sound of wine through the trees. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard. I'm still leaving in 2 weeks, she said. I know. And I still don't know if I can give you what you deserve. Let me decide what I deserve. She searched my eyes, looking for doubt. I didn't give her any. Okay, she said. Okay. We went inside my cabin and spent the rest of the day tangled up in each other. Not just physically, though there was that too. But talking, really talking about everything we've been holding back. She told me about the merger, about the pressure from the board, about the younger executive who was positioning himself to take her job if she showed any weakness. I told her about my marriage, about the guilt I still carried, about the fear that I'd never be enough for anyone. As the sun set, we lay on the couch, her head on my chest, my fingers running through her hair. This feels dangerous, she said softly. Good dangerous or bad dangerous? I don't know yet. The next week passed in a blur. We stopped pretending we were just neighbors. We cooked together every night. Took walks through the woods. Sat on the dock until the cold drove us inside. She started smiling more. Laughing more. The hard edges that had been there when she arrived began to soften. One night, we were sitting by the fire in my cabin when her phone rang. She looked at the screen and her whole body tensed. I have to take this, she said. She stepped outside. I could hear her voice through the window, professional and clipped. The Elena I'd come to know disappeared, replaced by the CEO. When she came back in, her face was pale. What happened? I asked. The merger is falling apart. The other company is getting cold feet. My COO can't close it without me. The board wants me back immediately. What did you tell them? That I'd be there Monday. That gives me 4 days. 4 days. The words hit me like a punch. You don't have to go back yet. You still have a week left on the cabin. I can't hide anymore, David. The company needs me. 240 jobs are on the line. If this merger doesn't happen, we'll have to do layoffs. I can't let that happen because I was too selfish to cut my vacation short. Taking care of yourself isn't selfish. It is when other people are depending on you. She sat down next to me. I knew this was coming. I just hoped I'd have more time. So what happens now? With us? She took my hand. I don't know. I want to say we'll make it work, that we'll find a way to see each other. But the truth is, once I'm back in that world, I won't have time to breathe, let alone maintain a long-distance relationship with someone I've known for 3 weeks. So that's it? We just end it here. I didn't say that. I'm saying I don't know. And I hate not knowing. We sat in silence, the fire crackling. Finally I said, then let's not decide tonight. Let's just have these 4 days. Whatever comes after, we'll deal with when it comes. She looked at me with something like relief. You're really okay with that? With not knowing? No. But I'd rather have 4 uncertain days with you than nothing at all. Those 4 days were bittersweet. We moved through them like we were trying to memorize everything. The way the morning light hit her face, the sound of her laugh, the feeling of falling asleep next to someone who understood the weight you carried. On the last night, we drove into town and had dinner at the small diner. The woman who'd recognized Elena was there. She looked at us, started to approach, then seemed to think better of it and stayed at her table. We ate burgers and fries and talked about nothing important. Favorite movies, childhood memories, the kind of easy conversation that felt like a luxury. When we got back to the cabins, we sat on the dock one last time. The water was still, reflecting the stars perfectly. I'm going to miss this, Elena said. The lake. All of it. The quiet. The simplicity. You. I'm 7 hours away. That's not that far. It's not the distance. It's the person I become when I leave here. That person doesn't have time for this. For us. What if you didn't become that person? What if you went back and set boundaries? Made time for your life, not just your work? She shook her head. You make it sound easy. I know it's not. But you're the CEO. You have power. You can choose to use it differently. And if I can't? If the company falls apart because I'm not willing to sacrifice everything anymore, then maybe it wasn't worth having in the first place. She looked at me sharply. You don't mean that. Don't I? Elena, you built something incredible. But what's the point if it costs you everything else? If you can't have a relationship, or a life outside work, or even just a peaceful morning watching the sunrise without feeling guilty about it. The point is that 240 people have jobs, that we're innovating in our field, that I proved everyone wrong who said I couldn't do it. And you did. You've already proven it. So what are you still trying to prove? She didn't answer. We sat in silence until the cold became unbearable. That night she stayed in my cabin. We didn't sleep. Just lay there holding each other, watching the hours tick by until morning when the sun came up. She got up quietly and started getting dressed. I watched from the bed. You don't have to leave this early. Your flight isn't until this afternoon. I know. But if I stay, I won't be able to go. She finished dressing and sat on the edge of the bed. Thank you. For these weeks. For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Elena. Let me finish. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if I can be the person you need me to be. But I want you to know that this mattered. You mattered. I sat up and took her hand. This doesn't have to be goodbye. Maybe not. But it has to be something like it. At least for now. She kissed me one last time. Soft and sad and full of things we couldn't say. Then she left. I heard her car start. Heard the gravel crunch as she drove away. And then there was just silence. I stayed at the cabin for the rest of the week. I'd paid for it and I didn't have anywhere else to be. The dock felt empty now. The mornings felt hollow. I tried to tell myself it was better this way. That we'd saved ourselves the pain of trying and failing. But I didn't believe it. On my last day, I was packing up when I heard a car in the driveway. For a wild moment I thought it might be her. That she'd come back. But it was just the cabin owner, stopping by to check on things. "How was your stay?" he asked. "Quiet," I said. "That's what people usually want." I nodded. As I drove away, I looked at her cabin one last time. The shutter I'd fixed was still there, solid and straight. A small mark that I'd existed in her life, even briefly. 3 weeks passed. I went back to Pittsburgh, back to my empty apartment, back to freelance work and conference calls and the slow rebuild of a life I'd put on pause. I didn't hear from Elena. I told myself that was fine, that we'd both known what this was. But I checked my phone more than I should have. Hoped for a text that never came. Then on a Thursday afternoon my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello. David? It's Elena." My heart stopped. "Hey. How are you?" "I'm okay. Busy. The merger went through. We closed it last week." "That's great. Congratulations." "Yeah. Thanks." Silence. Then she said, "I'm in Pittsburgh." "What?" "I'm in Pittsburgh. I have a meeting here tomorrow with a potential client. And I was wondering if you wanted to get dinner tonight." I couldn't breathe. "Yes. Yeah, absolutely." We met at a restaurant downtown. She looked different. Back in her CEO armor. Tailored suit. Perfect hair, makeup. The woman I'd met on the dock was hidden somewhere underneath. But when she smiled at me, I saw glimpses of her. We talked over wine and pasta. She told me about the merger, the fallout, the exhaustion. I told her about getting back to work, about the strange feeling of returning to normal life after everything. "I've been thinking about what you said," she said. "About boundaries. About using my power differently. And I hired a COO who can actually handle things when I'm not there. I told my board I'm taking every other Friday off. No calls, no emails. Just time. That's huge. It's terrifying. But it's also necessary." I realized something after I left the cabin. I spent 20 years building a company because I was afraid of being ordinary. But somewhere along the way I forgot to build a life. And I don't want to wake up at 60 and realize I spent everything I had on something that never loved me back. She reached across the table and took my hand. "I don't know if I can be good at this. At us. I'm still going to work too much. I'm still going to be difficult. But I want to try. If you still want to." I squeezed her hand. "I want to. It's going to be messy. 7 hours apart. Different schedules. I can't promise it'll work." "I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for a chance." She smiled. The real smile. The one from the dock. "Okay. A chance." We left the restaurant and walked through the city. It was cold, the first real cold of autumn. She leaned into me and I wrapped my arm around her. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything." "That morning on the dock. The first day we met. Why did you sit down? You could have just walked away." I thought about it. "Because you looked like I felt lost. And I figured if we were both lost, at least we could be lost together for a while." She stopped walking and looked up at me. "I'm glad you stayed." "Me too." We stood there on a busy Pittsburgh street. People moving around us, the city humming with life. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I'd found. 6 months later, things weren't perfect. They never are. Elena still worked too much. I still had bad days where the divorce felt fresh. We fought about her schedule, about my tendency to withdraw when things got hard, about the distance and the logistics and all the normal things couples fight about. But we also had good days. Weekends where she'd drive to Pittsburgh or I'd go to Chicago. Mornings on the phone before she went into the office. Text messages in the middle of the day that said nothing important but meant everything. She came back to the cabin with me that spring. We sat on the dock, our feet in the water, watching the sunrise the way we had that first morning. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Going back. Trying to make this work. Do you?" She thought about it. "Sometimes. When it's hard. When I'm exhausted and you're frustrated, and it feels like we're forcing something that shouldn't be this difficult. But then I remember what it felt like before. The emptiness. The feeling that I'd traded my whole life for a company that would replace me the second I wasn't useful anymore. And I know this is better. Even when it's hard, it's better. I kissed the top of her head. Yeah, it is. We sat there as the sun came up, turning the water gold. The same dock, the same lake. But everything was different now. We were different. David. Yeah. Thank you for not letting me disappear. I pulled her closer. Thank you for coming back. The light spread across the water, warm and steady, and we sat there together. Two people who'd been lost finding their way back to something that felt like home. Not perfect, not easy, but real. And that was enough. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't building something that lasts forever. It's allowing yourself to be seen by someone who makes you want to try. Elena taught me that success without connection is just noise. And I taught her that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the only way to build something that matters. We didn't find each other at our best. We found each other at our most broken. And somehow that made all the difference.